Hello, I'm male feminist Anders Bloom. Give you a big welcome.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Talk to Thorin, and my guest for this one is ynoT, who is a commentator. Maybe you've seen him do like ESL Challenger and some of the more North American events. Obviously, he was on an episode of Snake and Banter with me and Maui. And what happened was I did a tweet, as I want to do. I mean, if people don't know, I'm not one of these people who's trying to like get engagement with my tweets despite what people think. I just tweet whatever I think, whatever I feel like, literally any time of day. The joke is I've tweeted stuff when I was like on the dance floor in like a nightclub, like, well, actually, I do think it's about donk, and then just send it off.
That's relatable.
I just don't care, mate. So, but when I do it, obviously you get differing levels of feedback. Some people don't care. Sometimes people engage with it. Sometimes they blow up. Sometimes they never go anywhere. And I did a tweet where I think it was maybe, I'm going to assume it was after Legacy got eliminated at this major, because when I've been watching the recent teams that aren't called FURIA, they're obviously all semi-flawed within the Brazilian space. I mean, the joke about Pain Gaming is they got better by just only having 2 Brazilians and just making like a super team of all the other South American countries. So obviously the classic thing, we used to include Fury in this when they were bad. The classic thing you do is you think, right, well, once upon a time, it was now about 9 years ago, Brazilians were the best. In fact, they not only were the best team, they even had that second team, Immortals, that was pretty good and could sort of go top 10 and could make some playoff runs. Obviously made a major final one time. So traditionally, the talent pool of Brazil, I think, has always been fairly good. And what's crazy, this is what actually sets up this episode, is I actually think the last few years, the talent pool is the best it's ever been in terms of the depth. Like, there are you could actually make, as you've seen, you can literally make 3 teams that could be at the major that aren't called FURIA. That is totally plausible. And it's not just actually just the whole Americas thing. As you've seen in the results, they can also beat the other teams. They can beat the NA teams. They can beat the lesser EU teams. They can get the odd upset off a good EU team. So right now, we've got FURIA fixed. We can put that on the shelf right now. And if anything, that actually makes the discussion more interesting, because if you can't start the conversation of what would your Brazilian team be to like compete in CS, if it doesn't get to start with, I would have Thorin and Cesarato and Yuri. Well, everyone's going to say that, aren't they? That's basically been everyone's story, except me, for the last like 4 years at this point in time, basically since FURIA got good. Like, so I actually think it's a bit like why Mount Rushmore discussions are boring, because if you just make them like the GOAT, then it's like, right, it's like same pool Z, you know what I mean? Like, there's only going to be like one interesting answer, or one where there's much to go back and forth on. So I actually think there's a lot of potential discussion. So what I did is I just did a tweet where once Legacy got eliminated, because I'm sorry, I'm not one of these people who get sentimental in that sense. I'm not Brazilian, mate. So I don't have any reason to need them to succeed. Like, I love that Fury is great without Brazilians. Like, great, let's have Cesarato or win CS tournaments. But if you're going to, so when Legacy got eliminated, I didn't go, oh, what a shame, oh, they could have gone through, which they could. I just look at that squad and I go, mate, I would just airdrop, I would fucking evacuate latto straight out that squad. Then I'd go to some other team. And basically, I made a squad where, let me double check what it actually was.
I do have it pulled up if you're...
Yeah, go on. What was my, I only did 4. I left space for the 5th. What was my lineup?
Yeah. So I mean, that tweet in particular that you had posted, it was basically like you were saying, theorizing like a way that latto could possibly be on a better team, and you were comparing him to like, you know, how Insani is over on MIBR, and I assumed that after that you would put those two together. So you said, okay, Insani and then latto, who's going to be my AWPer, NQZ, who's going to be my IGL, Big Uzera already working with NQZ, you know what I mean? Like, it makes sense, AWP IGL combo, and then the 5th supportive element was what you had.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I left the 5th one open like that is I wouldn't claim to watch those teams enough to know who's like actually doing a good job as the supportive element. Like, obviously I'm watching the Fragger or the AWPer or the IGL. And also, I think when you look at those squads, I actually learned this the hard way when they made the previous FURIA lineup. When Fallen and Cello came over, I saw Cello was cooking in Imperial. I was like, maybe his can work. But when they made him the supportive element, it didn't really work that well. Whereas if I go the other way, if you remember back in the day on FURIA, they used to have that drop guy who used to get all the abuse. But if you ever watch, he even still does it now. He's actually really good at playing like all the crap positions.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of a specialist. So what we're going to do on this episode is kind of theory craft what a roster could be that isn't called FURIA. So everyone who's on FURIA, put them to one side. But all the others, essentially, we've got them all, mate. We've got Imperial, MIBR, Legacy. If you care, you can throw Red Canids in. I don't know who's going to get on from that. Pain, the Brazilians from it. So there's actually like a nice talent pool here. What we're going to try and show people is not only could you make a really good roster, so we'll see what the fifth would even be for that, but there's also other options as well. You can also go a different route for some of the players. So I would just start here. We can reference that if we want, but that was just like me laying the ground print of where I'm thinking. Let's just go roll for roll, shall we? So, actually, one thing before we start. The other impetus was, you said, understandably because of the games you're casting, that obviously I'm just watching these teams when they go to the Tier 1 tournaments. Like, I don't watch Legacy if they're in some random... I mean, they play a lot of actually South American lands. There's a lot of Brazilian lands. So I only know them versus top teams. You said you would actually cast loads of Brazilian games, right?
Yeah. I mean, a ton of like CCT events, South America in particular, is where I get a lot of my fix in. And you see some of these guys, like, I mean, even before they make names for themselves, and then everybody was like, "Oh, this guy's incredible. Where have you found him from?" And it's like, well, I mean, if you just pulled up the HLTV stats and went down a list, you could probably find him as easily as that, right? But you're not actually watching them, and that's one thing I think I mean, even like Bestia, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them when they made that big run to the last major. Yeah, this Tomasin kid, for one, like, he came out of nowhere from people's radars. He just kind of popped up, and I'm like, not to be like, I knew him when it wasn't cool, right? Like, when it wasn't cool to know Tomasin, I thought he was really cool. Like, that's just one example of these players that you'll find that if you just watch a little bit of them, you'll be like, wow, diamond in the rough player right then and there. So yeah, CCT is like primarily where I get my kick for South American CS.
Okay. So I think what we do is we just go roll for roll, and then we see at the end, would there be much change? And we got like a consensus. So, like, obviously, I think that for me, one of the less sort of spicy ones is the IGL one. I mean, in the sense that if people have watched my own talk show with Thorin, I mean, I just say to his fucking face, in my Brazilian super team, which could include FURIA players as the gag, I'd start with Big Azira, and then obviously then he's just like, what the fuck? I'm like right here. It's like, listen, mate, I'm just who I am. I'll just tell you the truth. So if people don't know, like, the joke is, obviously right now I wouldn't do it, but if you'd have asked me before when it was all Brazilian roster at the beginning of this year for FURIA, they were failing, what could you change? One of my suggestions might have been maybe you'd change from Big Azira, because I have to say, this is probably one of the players on my little hypothetical list. Look, you watch people like Latto and Insani, you're watching the Crosshair, you see how skilled they are, but I actually think Big Azira is one of those players where I tend to have a decent sense for like IGLs, and I actually think he's mad underrated, bro. I think it's just because Pain can be irrelevant at times that people don't really have him on their radar. Like, bro, this guy not only seems to be a good caller, like, you see his team's always had a couple of maps they're good on, and they can play like sort of up to the level of teams that should be way better than them. But more importantly, if a bit like Blitz from Mongols, he's also like a pretty good fragger for an IGL, mate. The amount of times I see him like top the scoreboard, or he does that thing where it's like, he isn't doing the Carrigan where it's like you just throw yourself into a blender and hope that while you get shot, two people behind you shoot them in the head. Like, he does the killing himself. I think he's actually kind of like a quite a versatile IGL. What do you think of this player?
I think personally, I completely agree with you. Like, I think as we go like down the list of roles, that one's going to be like probably the easiest for me to just say, yeah, I mean, Big Azera, if I have to pick a player. Like, just frankly, as far as like IGLs, and I don't know how you feel about roles. Like, I know a lot of people are like role cells or whatever, but I think they're pretty damn important. Like, when you look at Big Azera compared to Fallen, his switch to the rifle makes his defense on CT sides like entirely more valuable than, unfortunately, Big Azera, because he's taking on these shit spots. Like, he's willing to be the B site Mirage anchor. I mean, that's the biggest, haha example of a bad role, but like, no joke, Big Uzera's CT sides are a little bit more like allowing for him to make some moves, right? But on T side, they're like kind of similar. Like, they can definitely be a little bit more like opener than anything else, like obviously entry IGLs, but Big Uzera, like you're saying, I mean, he's the guy that you kind of want in that pack. He's not really the guy that you want to be playing for like clutches or like, to be supported by his teammates in some heavy manner. He'll be like 1-2, if not 3, but not really relying on anybody else behind him. So yeah, for me, it's really like a no-brainer. Like, he doesn't need to play anchor spots in this team that we're creating, I assume, but if I had to pick an IGL who could do that, it wouldn't be him, I don't think, but I don't think we really need to worry about that.
Do you have an alternative? Is there another IGL that we could suggest?
I actually do, but I don't think he's ready, unfortunately. I think they've shown that he's just green enough, and it would be Drop. I think Drop actually, previously having played those roles not as an in-game leader, could very seamlessly make the transition back into doing it. He's actually playing more star roles now on this new team. Funny enough, if you watch him on like Mirage, I guess, is a great example for most new players as well, so I'll stick to Mirage. Like, Connector on Mirage CT side, like, that's a star player position typically. Sometimes you'll see in-game leaders take that just so they can call around the map and see what's going on, but he likes it and he frags there. So, I mean, that's just one example of a player you could take, but I think that, again, yeah, he's just a little bit too new to it. I wouldn't trust him with big pieces right now, I don't really think.
And then I would say also, if we're just making like the super team of non-FURIA players,
Sure.
to me, the other most obvious one, just because he's got a bit of longevity at this point in time, is actually ynoT. Because whereas latto for me is more of a recent phenomenon, people are enjoying him now. I actually did my video on the ynoT guy last year. I think the video was even called something like, the most underrated player in Counter-Strike or something, because I would watch MIBR's games, and at the time, by the way, I know they've just bombed the major now, so people are going to think it's just as bad now. At the time, they were sort of like faking people out because they would get random upsets. Obviously, they beat Na'Vi at a major, etc. But if you ever saw, no joke, mate, they could play like 2 maps, and they had certain maps that if anyone picked, they had like no chance on. So basically, to me, it wasn't that much of like, it's MIBR, even though they had a decent like set of fraggers. That actually, by the way, that squad of MIBR even looked like they did just put together 5 fraggers. They didn't even look like they did the roles, and I think they were even passing around IGL over the years. So the player to me that stood out, just leaps off the screen, was ynoT. Like, if you ever watch, he is appropriately named. He has bonkers mechanics. Like, seems like aggressive rifle. It's basically what I was also trying to make that point in that video was, if you haven't ever watched him play, this is the sort of player you're going to want to watch if he's in a game. Like, this is the guy that you go on to with the Go TV. You're going to get some highlights.
Yeah, and here's like the thing, I guess, is that when you pick ynoT for a team, right? Like, the thing that you need to understand when you're picking him for a super team is that he needs resources. Like, you need to dedicate a lot of resources into him. He's not going to be a player who gives up a lot of positions and also does very well. And I think case in point to that was when MIBR tried Lukowzy. I mean, Lukowzy was a no-brainer to move up, I think, at the point in time where he made his way in. And it did not work. ynoT looked bad, Lukowzy looked bad, MIBR looked bad, and they were all pointing fingers. And you could point the finger in any direction you want. It's the caller, it's the upper, it's the star, it's the support. And frankly, it was like all of them at the same time, just for the lack of roles, right? And you just need to know that when you pick ynoT, you better have an anchor player who's willing to play those shit spots, right? Like, you better have an IGL who's willing to go in first a majority of the time. He's probably, in my opinion, the most supported player in all of South America that isn't named Quesarado. Like, he is the most needing of support, and that's fine. But again, you kind of just need to understand that, right?
And then obviously the other one that for me is like set. Spoiler, on the AWPA one, I mean, the joke is FURIA, and MIBR themselves would say, yeah, it's tricky, that spot, isn't it? It's not always the player you want. So the other one that I have sort of set, my 3 that are locked, are the Bigazera, ynoT, and then obviously now latto. Because if anyone's seen the rise of Legacy, I still think they've got clear flaws. Some of the players I think I'm a bit out on, they're not as good. Some of them are all right. I'm not a Demau hater by any means. Some of the rest of them, it depends on the game. I can take them or leave them. But the key thing for me is the latto guy just looks fabulous. Like, almost every time I see him play, and I'm watching him now against the tier 1 European teams. We're not watching him against just like an America's RMR. Like, he actually is carving up like real teams when he plays them, and just seems to have that actual like star presence in the game.
I've been loving latto for a really, really long time. Like, to the point where I mentioned before that I've been casting South American tier 2, right? And like kind of just like keeping my eye on these players. Like, I've been watching latto for like 6 years now. And this guy has been quite touted very early on as what I think it was Paladin. I think you've done episodes before with Paladin, right? I don't want to miscredit him, but I remember him saying to me that this guy is the Swiss Army knife of South American Counter-Strike. And that was like an eye-opener. Like, you put this guy in a situation where he should be getting no kills, he'll get you 2, he'll pick up his dead teammates off and get you a 3rd. Like, spots where like he isn't even necessarily supposed to do well, he does well just based on his mechanics alone. So that's what makes him so versatile. Like, he could be at any stage in the round, and this guy will be doing something for you. He'll be throwing a flash for you, right? He'll be going first if he needs to. He'll be cleaning up clutches. It's insane, actually, in recent history, just how much of that he has been doing. Like, if you watch back probably 3 demos of latto, you'll never really see him in the same scenarios. It feels like 2 times over and a half. Like, he's always doing something for his team that isn't necessarily expected. And it's really cool when you don't have a whole lot of that, I think, in South American Counter-Strike. Like, you have ynoT, right, who can like probably walk into a bomb site and kill 2 or 3 guys just based on his talent alone. But I think latto shines more when he's uncomfortable, as opposed to ynoT, who is, again, given resources to kind of just walk forward and kill, right?
And then obviously the 2 positions, I mean, one in the tweet I implied, I'm not even sure how I'd take, so I almost just wanted to be like, rather than put a name down when I don't really know, insert your 5th and basically see, does that roster work for you? The other position, this is why NQZ was on there at the time, is I do think the AWP position, quite obviously, is a tricky one. I mean, here's the obvious joke. FURIA has Molodoi from Kazakhstan. in MIBR, they have Klim from Russia, and even fucking Imperial has bloody Try from Argentina. So the Brazilian teams themselves are telling you, we don't really have that many good AWPers we're that confident in, which is crazy, because if no one knows, the idea of Fallen's like the last AWPer of the ones that people believe in is nuts, because I'll give you a little brief history lesson. Because the most famous Counter-Strike player in the history of Brazil before Fallen was Kogu, the joke in 1.6 was everyone tried to AWP in Brazil. So it was the opposite. In Brazil, actually, what they lacked was things like iGels and supports. Like they had AWPers coming out their ears, mate. There's like the joke really is there are players I could name that no one would even remember. But for like 6 months, he was like the next shit hot AWPer. And by the way, don't worry, everyone had that label. Like it's the next Kogu. The joke is even Fallen did before he then transitioned to becoming an iGel in CSGO. Like everyone wanted to be the Kogu. I actually think now, look, one fact is obvious. Fallen's not just the iGel, he's also the AWPer. So it's almost impossible traditionally to replace him. But then if you look at the others, they have come and gone. And I'm sorry, right now, here's why it's also not as easy as go look in your history books at who's had high placings. The one who should probably have taken his spot in history would obviously have been Henny, because he was on that second team. But at this point in time, it feels like people are out on him. He had his time on FURIA during the COVID period. No one ever brings him up. It's implied, by the way, if you ever actually read why he left FURIA, it's actually implied that, like, put it this way, there's a thing in football, mate, where there's a lot of really great Brazilian players. We're never like I'm the try-hard guy who's like being healthy and going to bed on time. Like it's actually quite famous that they have this almost rock star vision of being a star, where by being a star, you can come in a tiny bit hungover, or maybe you didn't, maybe in practice you go, coach, I didn't get good sleep last night. Can I just run around the side while they all play? And that's essentially what people have told me about Henny, is he's just that guy. He's the guy who's got the natural talent and he'll play a bit in the game, but he's never going to grind, which is implied to me is why they didn't want him in FURIA, unfortunately. So if you have a look, the people we're working with for AWP is NQZ from Pain, which I have to say, as you alluded to, I don't yet know if that's a product of being in Pain, because he certainly was up and down in past years. Just maybe you think of the last major, he had a pretty good run there. Obviously, you had the guy who, if another person who was the Pain AWPer, was Safe, and then he was looking really good years ago. Then he got that spot on FURIA. The problem is in FURIA, they've never built the team around the AWP, so he kind of just looked like whatever, and then he had to go away. And then you have, who would the third one? I guess you could say it's Sadzin now because of legacy. People would maybe put him forwards, right? Is the one that you're plumping for here? How are you figuring out the AWP situation?
See, like, my heart, I guess, wants to say that they should stay Brazilian, because they've tried in a number of different Brazilian teams, primarily and predominantly, and for some reason it just didn't seem to be a cultural fit, because it felt like he was playing fine. It looked like their trajectory was pretty decent, but I don't know why he just never really got the chance to stick around. And like, I don't know what to chalk that up to, right? Like the numbers don't tell me. So, I mean, looking at these players that you named, I think NQZ is probably the safest. But the interesting point about all of them is that they're all like mad young. Like all of the AWPers in South America that are kicking up a fuss right now are like 21, 20. And that's kind of a cool thing, I think, because...
By the way, that's also what screws Safe. He not only had his chance in FURIA, he's really old at this point. If people don't know, I think I'd have to check. He might even be 30 already. Yeah, exactly. So I feel like it's going to be a younger one we're going to pick here, right?
Yeah. I mean, see, like, I really want to go with Try, but I just have this weird gut feeling we may as well stick with NQZ here if we're bringing over Biguzera as well. Like, he's going to be the one who knows how to use the guy. Like, the only way I would not go for, I feel like, NQZ here is if Vinny was my IGL, and I don't know if I want Vinny as my IGL in this team. So it would be like Vinny, Try, or Biguzera NQZ, because I think the in-game leader really does have, I mean, that goes without saying, like a huge impact on how the AWPer actually performs. And NQZ seems to be just fine in where he's at, not really like calling upon all that much from his teammates, but just getting by. So I'd probably stick with NQZ on this one.
And I will just say, because this is like, it'll sound like a diss, but it's actually just the nature of CS. If you go and look, yes, NQZ are up and down. He's had lands against Europeans where he was also, like I say, he was good at the Blast Austin Major. He's also had lands where he's just kind of meh or whatever. That's also just the state of the AWP in CS2. Remember, I saw someone did like a post, like maybe like 2 weeks ago, where it showed like the HLTV ratings of the best AWPers. And the joke is, mate, by the time you get past the top 4, they're like 1.0 something players. Like there's no, it's not CSGO. You don't get the people where like your AWPer has to be a 1.1 something and he's always going to give you crazy production. Clearly in the game, it's a role that's always going to exist. I haven't seen any team go back to 5 rifles. That's something from like 20 years ago in CS. So if we're going to have an AWPer, it doesn't matter that he's not a superstar, right? He doesn't really have to be mono-C.
No, I mean, that's like, it would be cool, right? It would be really cool. I mean, it would really help also these teams that kind of...
it's basically why they've gotten the Molodys and the Klims, and they actually do what they want their own mono-C if they can, yeah.
Yeah, it's really top heavy right now, I think, as far as your star power is concerned in South American Counter-Strike, to where, like, if you can get an AWPer that's, like, just skating by and hitting the shots that he needs to, like, that's all well and good, but it would be really great to have somebody like Try show up regularly to these games, like tier 1. I'm sure you remember, at least a majority of people who are familiar with Try would remember, years back in, like, a Blast event, he blew Vitality out of the water, and that was everybody's first taste of that kid, right? Yeah. And he was young back then. He was young. So now he's like starting to get up and not like old by any means. He's 21 now, but he was like a baby back then. So, I mean, I'd like to, again, go for Try. I don't know if we could do like an asterisk on that, but like if I could just go raw, like talent level, I would probably pick Try. But NQZ at the same time, like he's not going to be putting up those Molodoi numbers. Try has that potential at least immediately on face value, but yeah, I mean, it's important, but not game breaking. I mean, clearly, like you say, it's not even a South American thing. Like AWPers in general really aren't having the numbers that they once did because of whether or not be, you know, Counter-Strike 2, whether it be like a shifted meta, I couldn't really tell you, but
to me, the ultimate example that you actually don't really have that many like good supportive elements in Brazil is also the FURIA roster. They just gambled like Yuri and Fallen can occupy those roles, former star players. They did, like, obviously, aside from the one unicorn, which was Taco all those years ago, in theory, they don't really do this role. Like, it tends to just be you just sort of take a player who could be a star but not as good, and then you just say, right, you're playing the shit spots basically, and just do the best you can. Like I said with Cello, they recruited Cello, who was probably the best Imperial player, and then said, right, you take all the crap spots that drop you stuff. It's like, well, why'd you recruit me then? Surely you recruited me because I was a star. I was fragging. It's like, no, listen, in our team, Yuri and Kesarato do that.
That's really funny you say that.
You don't get that spot. Go on.
Yeah, I think that's really funny you say that, because like my pick, like I don't want to jump ahead of the gun or anything like that, but he's a player that fell under that for a long time, and he's a guy who's been like a star here, a star there, a star everywhere, but benched and, you know, contract issues here, and then eventually brought out in Legacy. It's ynoT. That guy has taken on the absolute most crap, despite him being a player who could have been in an argument for probably the same positions as a Dumao and Sani or even latto at one point in time, I think. But like, you know, contract jail, I think just like a willingness to want to get better and a willingness to want to win has set him aside now to where he's playing the worst spots that you possibly could, it feels like, for a player of his nature. But he's really adapting. He needed time to adapt. Like, I think Snow's an example of that same player. Like, he's like, I want to win. Like, Big Uzair, I'll do what you want me to do. I'll anchor. I'll entry if I have to. Like, I'll take on whatever you give me, Captain. And I think that you could argue one way or another, Snow or ynoT, but I think I've just been more impressed with the progression of ynoT's game. But Snow brings a lot more energy to a team probably as well. So whatever you value more in that here or there, but I think ynoT would probably lean in my supportive element pick right now. He's been very impressive to me, his trajectory.
Okay, I could buy that. Here's why. Because again, I haven't paid as much attention beyond just seeing like him pop on my screen. But I will say, if he has taken those spots, he's actually fragging fairly decently for that role. Whereas the problem I have with Snow, he's actually one of my like problem players on Pain, is he has exactly the young man's curse. He's really young, if people don't know. And as a result, yes, he has absolutely choked his tits off in some games. I've seen it happen before. Like, he does have that like deer in the headlight sort of scenario. So I wouldn't hate that then. So you would probably put ynoT as your fifth?
I think I would. I think the only other players I would need to really do more vetting on, because I haven't watched all that much of them, are like, I genuinely don't know what roles they're playing, to be fair. Like, I haven't watched this team at all, but like Pains, DGT, and Davideus. Like, I don't really know what they're up to be honest with you, because I don't even think that they've known what they were up to for a majority of the time that they've been operating now. And it's been like, like 7 months since they got DGT in, I think. And I don't know why I haven't caught even like a single game after like their first 2 lands, which were dog. But yeah, I don't know what they're up to, those two guys. So,
I mean, that's also the weird thing about that Pain project is I wanted to go the other way. There was a period of time when NQZ was dodgy and Snow was shit in the bed, when I actually went, and I basically just went to Big Azir in a DM. I was like, mate, do you not just get offers from other teams? Like, why don't you just leave? Like, it's one of those ones like Carrigan and FaZe, like, mate, when you leave, the team's over. Like, you don't have to stay here. It's the others that have to figure out, you know, how do we get a better player on the team? You're the one who actually has the easy option. You can just go out the door and go to a better score. And look, he's one of those guys, a bit like Materis and Saw, where, mate, they're not they're not like American NBA players. They're not going somewhere for the contract. He's not going to leave. He basically just told me, like, I have had offers, but I'm not leaving. Like, this is just his project, mate. He wants it to be his project. He's going to bring the players to him. It is, but it means, as I said, if you look at Payne, the only way they've gotten relevant again is they had to just go and get these players where the joke was DGT was like the star of 9Z. The fucking... Right. Davideus was the star of Red Canids. They took other team stars, these aren't even Brazilian players, and then just made this weird South American mix. So, what you would take one of these and try them out as the fifth, maybe?
I think maybe Davideus, I would probably pick over DGT. He's another player that actually takes a good bit of resources, I think, to try and be successful. They kind of spread that out pretty well on Payne for the most part. I think that they do a pretty decent job of making sure that no one player is really, handed the keys while everybody else is just kind of watching in the backseat. I think that definitely Davideus is somebody who has a lot of individual mechanical abilities, but is put in worse spots just by the nature of how things go. It's like him and Snow. Like, alternatively, it feels like a majority of the time. So, yeah, I mean, culturally, I just don't really know how that works. I'd love to have a conversation with some of these players and really get an influence on, like, the Chilean guy. How do you feel like playing around a bunch of Brazilians and an Argentinian? Guatemalans, how do you feel like playing with Argentinians? Sure. I don't know. I don't really know. But there's a lot of it going on now. You can see, like, if you pull up HLTV right now and you just go to South America for the rankings, if you go back like 2 years even, there's not even nearly as many teams right now, or rather back then, as there are now with like a random Brazilian in my Argentinian team and vice versa, right? So if it works and they're all cool and like communication's good and they can all hang out, like I'm down for Davideus as well, alternatively than Nisam.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, since you referenced Guatemala, if people don't know, it's also another one of those situations where we've actually just taken a player out of their scene. Malbs used to literally play in like Team 1, which was like a Brazilian squad back in the day. Like, if he wasn't in a G2 level squad, he could also be in one of these teams easily and be one of the best players. So there are the odd talent in the other countries too. I think also in hindsight, because we were already talking about it, the fact that Insani really requires so much space, like these tier 2 players willing to take on the onus, like Nisam probably over Davideus. Otherwise, we're just taking Payne, the core of it, and adding 2 players that are superstars in some capacity, and it's like, it's not really going to balance all that well. Sure. I think Nisam will take on a lot more responsibility to allow this team to work. So I think I'm going to stick with Nisam, actually. I was just thinking about it. But yeah, to your point about like, tier 2 and how it like has shifted upwards. The episode I was referencing in the pre-show, we were doing a podcast with Anders somewhere. I don't remember which one it was. Yeah, probably Snake and Banner. Very, very recent, like fairly recent, I think. And you were talking about tier 2, how he's been casting over there recently. And you really do see that the level up that we've had watching tier 2 Counter-Strike League, we are blessed, man. Like looking at Twitch chat and seeing these absolute buffoons say things like, what are they doing? I play better than this. I'm level 10 on Face It. Like, brother, you couldn't even hold a candle to like Pronax, let alone these guys. Like I'm genuinely, it's insane to me to watch some of these guys in chat say things that I'm like blown away at, seeing new strategies, like innovations, even if they don't work. It's really, really cool to see that, where I think Anders also mentioned that you'll see that's where a lot of things are being picked apart from nowadays. Like a lot of new smokes that you'll find in those tournaments are found here. And no more, I think, than South America have I seen like the most batshit crazy bonkers strategies pulled out from the hat, right? And again, it might not work, but it's really cool to see that it's no longer all in on the star players. It's kind of now more exciting. It's really cool. Right, obviously, since FURIA can literally win any tournament in theory, and Legacy has won the tier 1.5 lands, it goes without saying we assume our team could be pretty good. But I just want to point out, look, obviously they don't need this team. All these other squads get to the tier 1 lands eventually anyway, depending on which one they qualify. If we did make a squad a la the one we've made, one combination of those 5 players, we maybe named like 8 or 9, but the main 5 we're going to drill down on. What would you...
Zera, NQZ, latto, Insani, and Nisam.
What would the projection be? What would the possibilities be? Where do you think they would place in the world? What would be reasonable?
For my money, I mean, like if we're seeing that Payne right now is already like number 10, like I don't know how much credence everybody gives to like world rankings in that regard. I think that it's kind of inflated right now because of a lot of different things. VRS, they're 15th. If I'm to take it like a Thorin's top 10, like, you know how you used to do like the Thorin's top 10 of any given point, I think I would probably slot them in at like 9-8, like pretty comfortably after like a 6-month span. Like I think that this team, if given the time to work, could definitely be a really, really strong one. And that's not to say that they couldn't do better or they couldn't do infinitely worse, given the fact that their roles are going to need time to settle, like they're going to need time to really learn how each other work. Because Counter-Strike is not binary. Like you're going to get into that server with a core of players that have never played together before, and you're going to need to give that a really good teething period. And you hope that they work together as people too. So if all is well and good on the personality front, I think that could easily be like a upper top 10 team, and then maybe push further just because these guys are going to, by nature of how young they are, outlast a lot of their competition. So that's where I think that they could lie. I think we could easily have two really solid top 10 South American teams right now. And obviously FURIA being one of them. I think there's a world we could even probably put together a third that's floating just outside, if not just alongside them, with the names that we've already said. So.
By the way, to be conservative, I also think that's just a fair place to go. I will just remind people, teams like FaZe and fucking Team Liquid have a hard time staying in the top 10 or getting into the top 5. So at the moment in CS, you don't just get a good squad and just walk in the top 5. With that said, though, I do think with the roster we've made, if you consider, presumably, Big Azir is going to bring some structure and some good calling, and then you look at the stars that we've got, mate. If you put latto and Inside, if you can make them work in the same team, I think this squad could cook, mate. Like, there really is a world where they could be like the 5th or 6th best team. I don't think that is like impossible or some complete fantasy. That's actually the reason I made the tweet. I actually wanted to show people that, if anything, outside of FURIA, what I get frustrated by in the Brazilian scene, I know people will know there's a lot of weird like contract handcuffs on certain players. You just seemingly can't make the second super team, you know. They're all, it's like one's over here and one's over here. And the joke really is, we're not just doing that to be like esoteric, like, I'm going to put 5 from different teams. There really isn't one team that has more than 2 people for me. So I actually would be really excited to see a project like this made if the funding was there.
And I think the one thing that we also need to mention is the coach role. I mean, I think that that's also a very important piece to these teams. And you go like one of 2 ways around this. Like, if I could be like, you know, again, this is like a completely hypothetical situation we've created anyway. Like, this is our little for fun thing. I would like to see Zach from Imperial. I think Zach from Imperial, with all the experience he's had, he could definitely bring a lot to this team. I think he's also seen so many AWPers in particular that I'd be really interested to see how he works there, to try and see what he can bring out of NQZ in this hypothetical. But again, like, if we got Try, dude, like, it makes a no-brainer for me to bring Zach alongside that. Like, if we could go those two, but you know, that route, like, otherwise I would just stick with the IGL's coach currently. Like, you bring Rix in from Pain if we've got Big Uzera. I think that makes the most sense. But that's a big support beam, I think, in these teams nowadays, particularly in South America, that has done a very, very good job of taking the experienced talent and making sure that they've got the right fit. I think they've done a banger job of that.
No, I'm with you. I actually like the angle as well, that we're doing it like half hypothetical, but half how it would actually work. So, for example, I'm going to go ahead and guess the Pain coach must actually be decent tactically, because they're actually a pretty decent tactical team. Whereas I know what you mean. If you want to work with the AWPers, not many teams have worked with the dominant AWPer. So you probably want the person who's coached the squad that knows how to set him up and give him the spare. I like the thinking. It sounds like a systems thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any final notes? Oh, Henny as well. Yeah, of course.
He's worked with him.
Do you have a final note on this topic? Is there some last message for people on in terms of what you think about Brazilian Counter-Strike, or what your hopes are for the future?
Yeah, actually, I think that it's very interesting to see the trajectory of all national Counter-Strike. You know, think back to when it was like predominantly Swedish and Danish, right? And like over time, they kind of ran themselves into the ground by playing musical chairs with the same core. Like, not only just of one team, not only just of 2 teams, but of like the top 3 teams doing this. And South America kind of did that too. I think they did a pretty good job of shooting themselves in the foot over the course of like 20, I would say probably 17 to 2020. Like, that's when 2020 is when we started to break away from just the core of probably Henny, Lucas, Phelps, and Steele, like interchangeably, any 3 of those 4 guys. And then on the other side of that, it was obviously notably Fallen, Fur, and then other of the 2 of Taco or Coldzera. And we've broken away from that pretty comfortably now. I think that we're well a ways away with that. So like, the way forward that I think where Swedish Counter-Strike in particular failed is that you need to be able to see these weird gaps of middle grounds between being a team or organization that has grinded so very hard to make it to the top, succeeded, and then either changing just because you're like, oh, guys, look, now we're doing well and we have resources and eyes on us. It's time to start to, like, you know, really bolster our firepower and things of that nature, because inadvertently they're hurting themselves in that process. And I think that's where kind of Swedish Counter-Strike started to stall a little bit. To whereas Brazilian Counter-Strike in specific, but South American, I guess, as a whole, has really done a good job recently of steering away from that. Like, they've not forgotten where they've come from, their roots, you know, seen a lot of these players brought into their teams that aren't like Henny or Phelps or Bolts, right? Like, those teams are utilizing those players aptly. Like Phelps only just got back into the scene right now, playing with a team on, I believe, Gaming Gladiators with like Joda, SHZ, Nekiz. Like, it's a little bit on the older side for me, but even still, like, that's where these guys are definitely belonging right now, not being thrown into like Fluxo, Imperial, and Legacy at this point in time. No, so I'm really happy to see that.
That's even a note I wanted to end on when you mentioned his name. That's even a sign of how there was like a dark time in Brazilian CS, where not only was the top team not there, but actually those players of the Immortals era, they never actually took the mantle. They never really did it. And the worst example is Phelps, because I can tell you, every Brazilian player would tell you this, not just on camera, privately. He was fabulously talented. It's just that for whatever reason, in all these teams he's had issues. There's reasons why he's moved to a million teams, bro. And it's like every 6 months or so. Sometimes he would even still last year be like, all right player, but he'd be the one that'd get moved out when they do the roster move. So unfortunately, I'll give people the really, like the splash of cold water. Guys, that was 10 years ago. He's 28 years old now. So if someone's 28 years old, they're on the back end of even being good, and there's any baggage problems at all. Like, we're not putting him in the super team at the very end as a last gasp. Like, I'm sorry, we actually we don't need him now unless he can come from a time machine. We've got latto and Insanity. I'm saying we don't need you anymore, Phelps, which is actually kind of somewhat a sad indictment of the Brazilian scene that he never did become his own superstar player.
Doing like the research for this video just to like really get in a headspace as to where South American Counter-Strike has been and where it is now, right? Like I did my research by looking at every year and how many South American teams were in the top 50, not 30, 50, because it's an important, jurisdiction to understand that like being top 30 is hard as hell, let alone being able to do it consistently. So I was just checking 50. And in 2016, you got SK, Immortals, Luminosity, Pain. Two of those teams are talking about those same cores I was talking about before. 2017, same core. 2018, same core. 2019, finally, we've actually spread a little bit of that talent up, right? But even then, it's a gap between the number 1 and 2 team that's blowing my mind. I mean, SK and Immortals were at most periods of time 10, if not 20 spots away from one another as far as their cores are concerned in the HLTV rankings at the end of the year, which is mind-boggling to me. Yeah. Because as soon as they turn over those players, as soon as the Immortals core breaks up, as soon as the MIBR core starts to shift, they're starting to close that gap, despite the number 1 team being worse for a short to medium period of time. An explosion of teams enter the top 50. Not only that, but we've seen them enter a higher rating in the top 20, even top 10 even, that we've ever seen before, right? You mentioned at the beginning of the video, we've got so much talent now in South America. It's insane. We can barely choose between a lot of these players, but you think about it, because we have so many teams in the top 50 now that it's hard. It's only hard because we've got so many teams to put them in, right? Like, it used to be really difficult because it didn't really exist and they weren't willing to make the move. But now we've got both. So I think that I guess a precautionary tale as like a wrap up to my thoughts on this entire segment is, if you're a South American team or player or organization or in-game leader, whoever's calling the shots in any capacity, right? You got to make sure that you're keeping your friends close and your enemies even closer as time goes by, right? Like, this is a time for where I think having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams in the top 50 right now for South America. Make sure you're keeping an eye on not only those, but as everybody below you too. And we've done a good job of it so far, but I think it needs to just continue on that front.
If you've heard that I'm a bad man, it's only in the Jamaican sense. Well, you know what? Here's my posse that's keeping me held down. And that's, of course, my Patreon community, the Illuminati. So this video and the others on my channel are brought to you in association with Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ben Glass, Thooorin, Nicky, Jasun, Jensen Goh. A special thanks goes out always to my main man, JerCkysMiNi0n and AmericanYone. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to take part in one of those lengthy donated discussions with me where you set the topics? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming interview subjects are? Maybe you want to ask me a question in my video AMA? Well, if any of the above perks tickle your fancy, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today, where at the Patreon link in the description box below. Booyah!